Hello and welcome to another episode of Sanely Insane. Frank Joseph Coppola was a police officer from Portsmouth, Virginia, who was convicted and sentenced to death for the 1978 capital murder of Muriel Hatchell. He maintained his innocence until his execution. Hatchell was bound with Venetian blind cords and then had her head slammed repeatedly into the floor by Coppola until she died. Coppola and his accomplices fled with $3,100 in cash and some rings from the crime scene. On September 26, 1978, Coppola was convicted of first-degree capital murder and sentenced to death in Virginia's electric chair. His conviction and death sentence were upheld after an appeal to the Supreme Court of Virginia. Coppola waived his subsequent appeals and was executed on August 10, 1982, the first person executed in Virginia since the U.S. Supreme Court reinstituted capital punishment in 1976. He was also the first person executed in Virginia since 1962. The resulting execution was botched as his head and leg caught fire during the execution. This provoked activists to protest, calling the method of execution inhumane. Coppola became somewhat of a martyr to the prisoners. Although no media representatives witnessed the execution and no details were ever released by the Virginia Department of Corrections, an attorney who was present later stated that it took two 55-second jolts of electricity to kill Coppola. The second jolt produced the odor and sizzling sound of burning flesh, and Coppola's head and leg caught on fire. Smoke filled the death chamber from floor to ceiling with a smoky haze. Jimmy Lee Gray was convicted for the murder of 3-year-old Teresa Jean Scales in 1976, after kidnapping her and assaulting her. At the time of this murder, he was free on parole after serving 7 years of a 20-year prison sentence for the murder of his 16-year-old girlfriend, Elder L. Prince, in Parker, Arizona. He was executed in 1983 by the state of Mississippi by gas chamber. He became the first person to be executed in Mississippi since 1976, when the death penalty was reinstated. Dan Lowazer, a reporter for United Press International, was one of the observers who witnessed Gray's execution. The gas chamber used in Mississippi had a vertical bar directly behind the inmate's chair. There was no headrest or strap used to restrain Gray's head. As Gray began breathing in the toxic gas, he started thrashing his head around, striking the iron bar repeatedly before he lost consciousness. Officials decided to clear the observation room 8 minutes after the gas had been released because of Gray's injuries. The decision to clear the room was sharply criticized by Dennis Balsker, Gray's attorney. Jimmy Lee Gray died banging his head against a steel pole in the gas chamber while reporters counted his moans, 11 according to the Associated Press. In part because Gray's execution was botched, Mississippi passed legislation making lethal injection the only method of execution for inmates sentenced after July 1st, 1984. Though 3 more inmates, Edward Earl Johnson, Connie Evans, and Leo Edwards, sentenced before this date, were still executed by lethal gas. Mississippi's gas chamber was decommissioned in 1998. Later, it was revealed that the executioner Barry Bruce was drunk during the execution of Jimmy Lee Gray. Lewis Evans III was the first inmate to be executed by the state of Alabama after the United States reinstituted the death penalty in 1976. The manner of his execution is frequently cited by opponents of capital punishment in the United States. After his 1976 parole from the Indiana prison, Evans and fellow convict Wayne Ritter embarked on a 2-month-long crime spree involving, by Evans's own admission, over 30 armed robberies, 9 kidnappings and 2 extortion schemes across 7 states. On January 5th, 1977, he and Ritter robbed and killed Edward Nassar, a pawn shop owner in Mobile, Alabama, while his 2 young daughters were in the store. The perpetrators fled but were captured on March the 7th by FBI agents in Little Rock, Arkansas. Among the evidence recovered was the gun used to shoot Nassar in the back and another gun stolen from the pawn shop. Although he gave a detailed confession, prosecutors refused to accept his plea of guilty because they wanted Evans sentenced to death, and under Alabama law, this is only allowed following a conviction by jury. Evans was tried in State Circuit Court in Mobile, Alabama on April 26, 1977 for the first-degree murder committed during commission of a robbery. During the trial, Evans again admitted to his crime and stated that he did not feel remorse and that under the same circumstances he would kill again. Furthermore, he threatened that if the jury did not sentence him to death, he would escape and murder each of them. Despite his testimony, the jury was instructed to consider all the evidence and return a verdict of guilty only if the prosecutors had left no reasonable doubt. The jury convicted Evans of the capital offence charged, thus imposing the death penalty after less than 15 minutes of deliberation. On April 22nd, 1983, John Evans was executed. After the first jolt of electricity, sparks and flames erupted from the electrode attached to Evans's leg. The electrode burst from the strap holding it in place and caught on fire. Smoke and sparks also came out from under the hood in the vicinity of Evans's left temple. 2 physicians entered the chamber and found a heartbeat. The electrode was reattached to his leg and another jolt of electricity was applied. This resulted in more smoke and burning flesh. Again, the doctors found a heartbeat, ignoring the pleas of Evans's lawyer. A 3rd jolt of electricity was applied. The execution took 14 minutes and left Evans's body charred and smouldering.